Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a cliff, not physically, but psychologically. Below you stretches an abyss so vast and terrifying that your mind refuses to acknowledge its existence. You've been living your entire life on this precipice, walking carefully along its edge, never daring to look down, never questioning why you feel this constant gnawing anxiety in your chest. You wake up each morning with the same heaviness, the same sense that something fundamental is wrong with your existence, yet you can't quite name what it is. You tell yourself you're happy. You recite the mantras of modern contentment. You have a career, relationships, goals, distractions. But in those quiet moments, those 3 a.m. awakenings when the noise of the world falls silent, you feel it, the weight, the crushing realization that you've been living someone else's life, following someone else's rules, pursuing someone else's definition of success and meaning. Here's what's truly unsettling. The very thing you've been taught to fear most, your weakness might be the key to your liberation. But not in the way you think. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." But he didn't mean what you think he meant. He wasn't advocating for resilience in the face of external hardships. He was pointing to something far more radical, far more dangerous to the established order of your existence. He was suggesting that your perceived weaknesses, your fears, your doubts, your darkest impulses, are not obstacles to overcome, but doorways to walk through. Consider this paradox. The most psychologically free individuals in history were often those who society labeled as weak, troubled, or broken. Van Gogh, tortured by mental illness, created beauty that transcends time. Dostoevsky, imprisoned and epileptic, wrote novels that dissected the human soul with surgical precision. Kafka, riddled with anxiety and self-doubt, penned works that captured the absurdity of modern existence better than any confident philosopher ever could. What if the very thing you're trying to fix about yourself is actually the source of your greatest potential power? You see, there's a conspiracy of mediocrity that surrounds you. It whispers constantly in your ear. Be normal, be acceptable, smooth out your rough edges, hide your strangeness, conform. This conspiracy has convinced you that your weaknesses are shameful secrets to be hidden, overcome, or medicated away. But what if this conspiracy exists precisely because your authentic self, complete with all its perceived flaws, represents a threat to the systems that profit from your compliance? Think about the last time you felt truly alive. I'm not talking about pleasure or comfort or even happiness. I'm talking about that electric feeling of being completely authentically yourself. Chances are it happened when you stopped trying to be strong, when you stopped performing, when you allowed yourself to be vulnerable, imperfect, real. In that moment of supposed weakness, you touched something that the performative strength of your daily life could never reach. Here's the question that will haunt you. What if your entire understanding of strength and weakness has been deliberately inverted? What if the courage to be weak, to be authentically, unapologetically yourself, is the most radical act of strength possible in a world designed to make you conform? You've been conditioned to believe that weakness is the enemy, that it must be conquered, eliminated, transcended. But Nietzsche understood something that modern psychology is only beginning to rediscover. The shadow contains the gold. Your weaknesses aren't bugs in your programming, they're features. They're the raw material of your individuation, the dark soil from which your authentic power grows. But here's where it gets dangerous. Truly dangerous. Because once you begin to see your weaknesses not as problems to solve but as mysteries to explore, everything changes. The life you've built, the identity you've constructed, the relationships you've maintained, all of it becomes suspect. All of it reveals itself as potentially false. Elaborate performance designed to hide your true self from a world that has taught you to fear your own authenticity. The cliff you're standing on, it's not the edge of destruction. It's the launching point into a life you've never dared to imagine. But first, you have to be willing to jump. You have to be willing to embrace the very thing you've spent your entire life running from. Are you ready to discover why your weakness might be your greatest strength? Are you prepared to question everything you've been told about who you should be and how you should live? Because once we begin this journey together, there's no going back to the comfortable lie of your performed strength. The abyss is calling, and it knows your name. The conspiracy against your authentic self didn't begin yesterday. It didn't even begin in your lifetime. It's a multi-generational project, a systematic dismantling of human authenticity that has been refined and perfected over centuries. To understand why you feel this constant tension between who you are and who you think you should be, we need to excavate the psychological and philosophical foundations of this grand deception. Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious, a shared psychic substrate that influences how entire cultures think, feel, and behave. But what Jung discovered was more disturbing than he initially let on. The collective unconscious isn't just a repository of universal symbols and archetypes, it's also a prison. It contains what he termed the collective shadow, all the aspects of human nature that civilization has deemed unacceptable, dangerous, or weak. Your individual shadow, those parts of yourself you've learned to hide, suppress, or deny, is directly connected to this larger cultural shadow. When you feel shame about your sensitivity, your anger, your fear, your unconventional desires, you're not just experiencing personal neurosis, you're experiencing the weight of thousands of years of cultural conditioning that has taught humans to fear their own nature. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this more clearly than perhaps any philosopher before or since. He recognized that what we call morality is often just disguised weakness, the weak imposing their limitations on the strong by making strength itself seem immoral. He called it slave morality, and it operates through a brilliant psychological mechanism. It makes you complicit in your own oppression by convincing you that your oppression is actually virtue. Think about it. You've been taught that ambition is selfish, that anger is destructive, that desire is shallow, that questioning authority is dangerous. You've been conditioned to see your natural impulses, the very forces that could drive you toward authentic self-expression, as character defects to be overcome. This isn't accidental, it's systematic. Arthur Schopenhauer, who deeply influenced Nietzsche, understood that the will, the fundamental life force within you, is inherently disruptive to social order. Your authentic desires, your genuine needs, your real personality, these things don't fit neatly into the roles society needs you to play. So society has developed sophisticated methods to make you police yourself, to make you the agent of your own domestication. The modern therapeutic culture, while well-intentioned, has become part of this system. You're encouraged to work on yourself, to heal your trauma, to become your best self. But notice the underlying assumption: there's something wrong with you that needs fixing. The natural chaos of human existence, the messiness, the contradictions, the uncomfortable truths, are pathologized rather than embraced as essential aspects of being alive. The psychological roots of your weakness phobia run deeper than personal experience. They're embedded in the very structure of civilization itself. Civilization requires predictability, conformity, the subordination of individual will to collective needs. It can't function if everyone is following their authentic impulses, questioning established norms, refusing to play assigned roles, so it develops mechanisms to contain the human spirit without appearing to. It creates elaborate reward systems for compliance and punishment systems for authenticity. It teaches you to internalize its values so completely that you become your own warden, your own judge, your own executioner of possibility. Aldous Huxley foresaw this in Brave New World, a society where people are controlled not through violence but through pleasure, distraction, and the systematic elimination of discomfort. You don't need gulags when you can convince people to imprison themselves in lives of comfortable mediocrity. You don't need external censorship when people censor their own thoughts before they're even fully formed. The most insidious aspect of this system is how it makes you grateful for your chains. You feel relieved when you suppress an uncomfortable truth. You feel virtuous when you deny a difficult desire. You feel mature when you abandon a dream that seems impractical. The system has taught you to experience your own diminishment as growth. But here's where it gets truly psychological. The energy you use to suppress your authentic self doesn't disappear. It gets redirected into what Jung called neurotic symptoms. Your anxiety, your depression, your sense of meaninglessness. These aren't random chemical imbalances. They're your psyche's way of protesting against the violence you're doing to your own nature. Every time you choose the safe path over the authentic path, every time you perform strength instead of honoring your genuine feelings, every time you prioritize what others think over what you know to be true, you're feeding the very system that keeps you imprisoned. You're becoming an agent of your own suppression. The hidden problem isn't that you're weak. The hidden problem is that you've been convinced that your authentic self, with all its messy, inconvenient, socially unacceptable aspects, is the enemy. But what if the opposite is true? What if your so-called weaknesses are actually your psyche's way of pointing you toward your true path? The foundations are crumbling. The question is, are you ready to see what's been built on top of them? You wake up tired, not physically tired, though you are that too, but existentially exhausted. There's a weight in your chest that no amount of sleep can cure, a heaviness that follows you through your days like a shadow you can't shake. You tell yourself it's stress, or age, or the state of the world, but the truth is more disturbing. You're experiencing the accumulated cost of a lifetime spent at war with yourself. Every moment you spend performing strength instead of acknowledging your authentic feelings creates what neuroscientists call cognitive load. Your brain is literally working overtime to maintain the disconnect between who you are and who you're pretending to be. This isn't metaphorical, it's measurable. Brain imaging studies show that people living incongruent lives exhibit chronic activation in the anterior cingulate cortex, the brain's conflict monitoring system. You're literally burning neural energy 24/7 to maintain a false self. But the consequences go far deeper than fatigue. They reshape the very architecture of your reality. Consider what psychologists call confirmation bias. your brain's tendency to seek information that confirms your existing beliefs while ignoring contradictory evidence. When you've built your identity around being strong, successful, or having it all together, your perceptual apparatus becomes a filtering system designed to maintain that illusion. You literally stop seeing opportunities that might require vulnerability. You become blind to connections that might demand authenticity. You develop a kind of psychological tunnel vision that keeps you trapped in increasingly narrow corridors of possibility. This perceptual narrowing doesn't just affect how you see yourself, it affects how others see you too. There's a phenomenon in social psychology called emotional contagion. The emotional states you suppress don't disappear, they leak out through micro-expressions, body language, and what researchers call emotional atmosphere. People around you unconsciously sense the tension between your performed self and your authentic self, even if they can't articulate what they're sensing. The result? Your relationships become collaborations in mutual performance. You attract people who are also hiding from themselves, who are also invested in maintaining false personas. Your connections become based not on genuine intimacy, but on shared delusion. You create what sociologist Irving Goffman called life as theater, elaborate performances where everyone is acting. Everyone knows everyone else is acting, but no one dares to break character. The economic system has evolved to exploit this psychological splitting. Consumer capitalism doesn't sell you products, it sells you temporary relief from the anxiety of authenticity avoidance. Every purchase promises to bridge the gap between who you are and who you think you should be. The clothes that will make you confident, the car that will make you successful, the vacation that will make you happy, the degree that will make you worthy. The neurological consequences compound over time. Chronic stress from authenticity avoidance floods your system with cortisol, literally shrinking the hippocampus, responsible for memory formation, while enlarging the amygdala, responsible for fear response. You become more anxious and less able to form meaningful memories. Your capacity for joy diminishes while your sensitivity to threat increases. You develop what researchers call learned helplessness, not because you're actually powerless, but because you've trained yourself to ignore your genuine responses to situations. Perhaps most tragically, you lose access to what psychologists call intrinsic motivation, the natural drive that emerges from authentic interest and genuine curiosity. When you're constantly performing strength, you lose touch with what actually energizes you, what genuinely matters to you, what you would choose if no one else's opinion mattered. You become dependent on external validation for direction, like a compass whose needle has been permanently deflected away from true north. The children growing up in this system are paying the highest price. They're learning to perform emotional regulation before they've even learned what their genuine emotions are. They're developing anxiety disorders, not because they're weak, but because they're trying to be strong in ways that violate their authentic nature. They're becoming depressed, not because they're broken, but because they're being trained to abandon themselves before they've even discovered who they are. The collective impact is a society of people who are simultaneously overconnected and profoundly lonely, constantly busy but deeply purposeless, materially prosperous but spiritually impoverished. We've created systems that can deliver unprecedented comfort and convenience, while systematically undermining the psychological conditions necessary for human flourishing. You feel it, don't you? This creeping sense that something fundamental has gone wrong, not just in your personal life but in the very fabric of how humans are living. This isn't depression, it's clarity. This isn't weakness, it's your psyche refusing to participate in its own destruction any longer. The question is no longer whether these consequences are real. They're manifesting all around you, in every burnout, every anxiety disorder, every existential crisis, every midlife awakening, every moment of crushing loneliness in a hyper-connected world. The question is whether you're ready to stop being complicit in the system that's creating them. The rebellion begins with a single terrifying act. You stop pretending. Not gradually, not strategically, not when it's convenient or safe. You stop pretending right now, in this moment, about the thing you've been lying to yourself about most consistently. Maybe it's that you hate your job. Maybe it's that your relationship feels like a prison. Maybe it's that you're desperately lonely despite being surrounded by people. Maybe it's that you're terrified of your own potential. Whatever it is, you name it, out loud, to yourself, without immediately rushing to fix it, explain it away, or cushion it with qualifications. This is what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of the revaluation of all values, not a philosophical exercise, but a lived experience of turning your entire world upside down by finally telling the truth about what you actually experience. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think the rebellion involves becoming harder, more aggressive, more demanding. They misunderstand Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch as some kind of Superman fantasy, a transcendence through dominance. This is exactly backwards. The real rebellion is the courage to be soft in a world that demands hardness, vulnerable in a culture that worships invulnerability, uncertain in a society that punishes questions. Consider the most revolutionary figures in history. Jesus of Nazareth didn't conquer through military might. He conquered through a radical willingness to love his enemies and embrace suffering. Gandhi didn't defeat the British Empire through violence. He defeated it through an even more radical commitment to nonviolent resistance that revealed the fundamental illegitimacy of systems based on force. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't change America by becoming harder than his oppressors. He changed it by remaining morally consistent in the face of hatred. What made these figures dangerous wasn't their strength in the conventional sense. It was their refusal to participate in the psychological contracts that kept oppressive systems functioning. They broke the unspoken agreement that says, "I'll pretend to be what you need me to be if you'll pretend to be what I need you to be." This is your path to freedom, strategic authenticity. Not the naive authenticity that shares everything with everyone, but the radical authenticity that refuses to betray your own experience in service of others' comfort. Start small, but start now. The next time someone asks how you're doing, instead of automatically saying fine, pause, check in with yourself. If you're struggling, say I'm struggling. If you're scared, say I'm scared. If you're excited about something unconventional, share your excitement instead of dampening it to match others' energy. Watch what happens. Some people will be uncomfortable. Some will try to fix you, change the subject, or minimize your experience. These reactions will teach you something crucial. Most of your relationships have been based on your willingness to manage other people's discomfort with authenticity. You've been performing emotional labor to keep others comfortable with their own inauthenticity. The rebellion requires you to stop doing this emotional labor, not out of cruelty, but out of respect for yourself and ultimately for them. When you stop enabling others' avoidance of authenticity, you give them the opportunity to grow. When you stop pretending, you give them permission to stop pretending too. But prepare yourself. This will feel like social death. Your false self will panic, telling you that without the performance, you'll be rejected, abandoned, alone. This is what psychologists call extinction burst. When an old pattern increases in intensity right before it dies, your conditioning will fight back harder than ever, flooding you with shame, anxiety, and the desperate urge to return to the safety of pretense. This is precisely when you must not stop. This is when you must remember that every authentic person who ever lived had to walk through this valley of psychological death. Carl Jung called it the dark night of the soul. Joseph Campbell called it the belly of the whale. It's the necessary passage between who you've been pretending to be and who you actually are. During this passage, you'll discover something extraordinary. Your so-called weaknesses are actually your connection points to authentic power. Your sensitivity isn't a flaw, it's your ability to perceive subtleties that others miss. Your anger isn't a character defect, it's your psyche's way of telling you when your boundaries are being violated. Your fear isn't cowardice, it's your wisdom protecting you from genuine threats while pointing you toward what matters most. The historical figures who changed the world understood this. Frida Kahlo transformed her physical pain into art that speaks to universal human suffering. Ernest Hemingway channeled his trauma into literature that redefined how we write about courage. Marie Curie used her status as an outsider in a male-dominated field to pursue discoveries that others couldn't imagine. They didn't overcome their weaknesses. They learned to dance with them, to find the gift hidden within the curse, to discover that their greatest vulnerabilities were also their greatest sources of creative and moral power. This is the counterintuitive truth that changes everything. Authentic weakness is the foundation of genuine strength. Not the performed strength that depends on constant effort and external validation, but the organic strength that emerges when you stop fighting yourself and start working with the full spectrum of your human experience. The rebellion isn't about becoming someone new, it's about archaeologically excavating who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning, expectation, and performance. It's about remembering that before you learned to be afraid of your own nature, you had access to an authentic power that required no effort because it was simply the natural expression of your being. Are you ready to remember who you were before the world taught you to be afraid of yourself? Are you prepared to discover that your weakness might be your greatest rebellion against a system designed to keep you small? The revolution starts now, with you, with the truth you've been afraid to tell. Here is the truth that will shatter everything you thought you knew about human existence. There is no weakness. There never was. What you've been calling weakness your entire life is actually life itself. Raw, unfiltered, authentic life, trying to live through you despite every system, every institution, every voice that has tried to convince you to abandon your own experience in favor of someone else's blueprint for how you should exist. Your sensitivity, that's not weakness. That's your nervous system operating at a higher frequency, picking up subtleties and nuances that others miss entirely. You're not broken. You're a high-resolution instrument trying to function in a low-resolution world. Your tears aren't evidence of fragility. They're proof that you're still alive enough to feel the full spectrum of human experience in a culture that's gone emotionally numb. Your fear, That's not cowardice, that's your deepest wisdom speaking to you in the only language it knows. Fear doesn't tell you what to avoid, it tells you what matters most. It points you toward the edges of your current identity, toward the places where growth is possible, toward the territories of your life that are still wild and unexplored. Every fear you've ever had has been an invitation disguised as a warning. Your anger, that's not a character defect. That's your soul's refusal to participate in its own diminishment. It's your psyche's way of saying this is not acceptable when something violates your deepest values. Anger is the guardian of your boundaries, the fierce protector of what you hold sacred. The people who taught you that anger was dangerous were the people who needed you to accept the unacceptable. Your confusion. That's not stupidity, that's intelligence refusing to pretend it understands things that don't actually make sense. Confusion is the birthplace of genuine wisdom. It's your mind's way of saying the story I've been told doesn't match the reality I'm experiencing. Every breakthrough in human understanding has begun with someone being confused enough to question what everyone else accepted as obvious. Your darkness, that's not pathology. That's the rich soil from which your most authentic self grows. Carl Jung spent his entire life trying to convince people that the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've been taught to reject, contains the very qualities we need to become whole. Your darkness isn't the enemy of your light, it's the generator of your light. Without it, you have no depth, no complexity, no genuine power. This is what Nietzsche really meant by the will to power. Not dominance over others, but the courage to fully inhabit your own existence. Not power over, but power through. Not the power to control, but the power to create. Not the power to force, but the power to become. You see, the ultimate conspiracy isn't that society wants to make you weak. The ultimate conspiracy is that society wants to prevent you from discovering how powerful you already are. Because once you realize that what you've been calling weakness is actually your greatest strength trying to emerge, once you understand that your authentic self is not something you need to create but something you need to stop betraying, once you see that your so-called flaws are actually your unique gifts wrapped in painful packaging, then you become dangerous. Dangerous to every system that profits from your self-doubt. Dangerous to every institution that requires your compliance. Dangerous to every relationship based on mutual performance rather than authentic connection. Dangerous to every belief system that needs you to remain small in order to function. The moment you stop seeing yourself as broken, the moment you stop trying to fix yourself, the moment you start treating your full human experience as sacred rather than shameful, that's the moment you reclaim the power that was always yours. Not power over others, but power over your own existence. Not the power to control outcomes, but the power to respond authentically to whatever arises. This is the final revelation. You don't need to become strong. You need to stop pretending to be weak. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to stop believing you're broken. You don't need to find your purpose. You need to stop abandoning the purposes that have been calling to you your entire life. Every moment you've spent trying to overcome your weakness has been a moment stolen from the discovery of your authentic power. Every hour you've invested in becoming acceptable has been an hour diverted from becoming irreplaceable. Every year you've dedicated to fitting in has been a year taken from the possibility of standing out in ways that only you can. The 23 minutes are over, but the lifetime has just begun. You are standing at the threshold of a life you've never dared to imagine. A life where your sensitivity becomes your superpower, where your fear becomes your compass, where your anger becomes your sword of truth, where your confusion becomes your gateway to wisdom, where your darkness becomes your source of authentic light. The choice is yours. You can return to the comfortable prison of performed strength, the exhausting theater of having it all together, the safe shores of acceptability, or you can step into the wild territory of your authentic self, complete with all its messy, inconvenient, socially unacceptable glory. But know this, once you've seen the truth, once you've recognized that your weakness was never weakness at all, but life itself trying to live through you, you can never fully unknow it. It will haunt you in every moment of pretense, call to you in every performance, whisper to you in every act of self-betrayal. The abyss you've been afraid of isn't beneath you, it's behind you. What lies ahead isn't the void, it's the fullness of a life finally lived from the inside out. Your weakness was never your enemy, it was your invitation to come home to yourself. Welcome home.